Hello there. The Tory party left the political casino with Liz Truss as their prize last month. They now have no option but to stick with her or face total wipeout. Now, if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe and then like and comment below. A Tory party riven down the centre goes to their conference today. And having gambled the house on Liz Truss, there appears to be a lot of gambler's remorse, especially amongst the people that directly matter, the party's MPs, most of whom rejected Liz Truss. Those MPs can still get their letters of no confidence in to force a vote of no confidence and potentially upend her career within weeks of her getting the keys to number 10. That could force another painful leadership election as they cast around for someone else to effectively replace Boris Johnson. But would they gamble on doing that? That would certainly put a terminal dent in any remaining credibility that the Tories have. Even if MPs did manage to get their favoured Rishi Sunak in as their leader. And to do that, MPs would have to ensure that Rishi was the only candidate, thereby avoiding the embarrassment of the Tory party membership selecting what MPs might see as the wrong candidate, like Kemi Badenoch, for example. Or maybe Boris Johnson would have a phoenix-like recovery. Except for the Privileges Committee being lined up to throw him out of the door, that is. Anyway, getting rid of Truss so soon would be a big gamble, as would trying to get her to change course back onto the high tax and spend path, because the other half of the party that wants true conservatism to be observed would be exasperated, leading to Lib Dems in blue wall constituencies rubbing their little hands with glee as previous Tory voters switched to them. No, ducking and diving and flipping and flopping with just a couple of years at best until the next election is not, in my humble opinion, an option for the Tories. With Liz Truss, they've gone all in. And here's an interesting thought. There is an old adage that it's best not to sit around seeking permission, but to act first and apologise later. So it is conceivable that Liz Truss did exactly that. Maybe she and Kwarteng knew that if they were to put out their full plans at the start and then ask for permission to do it, then they would have been felled at the first hurdle. And maybe they also realised that there would be some kickback from the markets when they did it. Maybe that was all factored in. Maybe they thought, let's commit right now and force the issue. Maybe they think that by doing things this way round, it will force the party to go for broke and back Trussonomics. Yes, I know that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng are saying right now that they should have been more open and upfront when laying the ground for their plans, but maybe that's just the apology after intentionally taking the plunge first. Now, whether this plunge into the icy political and economic waters was an intentional strategy or not, to make it work, they've got to get the country to acknowledge the difficulties other developed countries around the globe are suffering right now. But for that, they need the UK media on their side. They need the likes of the BBC to tell the British public about the levels of inflation within the Eurozone, for example, and also what debt to GDP levels other countries in the G7 are having to endure. And also that, according to the official French Economic Statistics Bureau, the INSEE, inflation in France is 3.1% lower than it would otherwise be because of huge government spending. France's anti-inflation spending since the start of the crisis will next year reach more than 85 billion euros, 3.5% of gross domestic product, said Reuters. Nothing comes for free. This will have to be paid for, just like ours. And as Reuters pointed out a couple of days ago, Polish inflation is running at 14.8%. The Netherlands, yes, the Netherlands, is suffering inflation of 13.7%, while its government does very little in comparison to others to help their citizens. Germany is spending €95 billion to help its people, but still has inflation at 8.8% and is expected soon to hit 10%. While the Times reports that prices in the US are still trending upwards despite interest rates of 3 to 3.25% and inflation already running at 8.5%. But there is no attempt in the UK press to put any of the problems the UK is facing into that context. For them, there is only the backdrop of a Tory government and Brexit. That's it. As far as our lefty mainstream press are concerned, there is nothing global about the problems we face in the UK. In short, Liz Truss and her Tory team will not be permitted the airtime or column inches to point this sort of thing out. Even though bond experts are saying that the Eurozone now faces exactly the same problems that we in the UK do. Now many people are saying that Truss and Kwarteng were wrong to reject calls for a projection on the economy of their plans from the Office for Budget Responsibility before they went ahead with the announcement. But had they done so, the OBR projections would have been negatively coloured by the ONS reported 0.2% contraction in the economy in Q2. That figure, which was part of the decision which the Bank of England used to increase the bank rate, has subsequently been revised upwards to 0.1% growth. Just an observation. Now, I'm not defending anyone, just pointing out that if the Tories want to win the next election, they might have to go the whole hog and back Truss to the hilt. By splitting down the middle, and with talk that some Tory MPs are cozying up with their Labour counterparts to derail Liz Truss's plans, or like Gove are just thinking of voting against them, they are automatically consigning their own party to a decade in opposition. And now that the Labour Party has embraced proportional representation at its core, if the Labour membership could convince Starmer to back it and change electoral law, the Tories may never see majority seat power ever again. As I see it, if they want to prevail, the Tories have to get behind their leader today. And as I said, maybe that is the Truss plan. Either that or call an early general election and drop the whole thing in Labour's lap. Watch them cock it all up and hope to get back in 5 years' time. After Labour have tied us back into the EU single market, changed the voting rules, bankrupted the UK and been forced to go cap in hand to the IMF, of course. Now, one interesting development in all of this emerged after the Bank of England was forced to make a £65 billion intervention in our pensions market due to the imminent implosion of something called liability-driven investments, or LDIs. This was painted as all down to Trussonomics, but not all is as it seems. Now, these LDIs are meant to somehow stabilise the market, if used sparingly and judiciously. But they weren't. LDIs were used more and more to try and boost returns. Now, the chairman of Next, Brexiteer Lord Wolfson, said that his treasurer wrote to the Bank of England when Mark Carney was in charge, voicing concerns that these LDIs were a ticking time bomb. Wolfson said his company rejected LDIs. We not only said we wouldn't do LDIs when we were being sold them by everyone who thought they were a brilliant scheme, said Wolfson, we also, our treasurer, wrote to the Bank of England to say that we felt it was destabilising. Now, as a cynic, looking at the speed and depth with which the Bank of England responded to the looming pensions crisis seems to suggest to me that bank officials were well aware of the problem and had the plan already in place to quickly deal with it. Especially when the Telegraph reports that the Bank of England itself said in 2018 that LDI stresses could arise. But Carney still came out to give Truss a public kicking about it last week, didn't he? But right now the pensions are safe and the pound has recovered against the dollar and the euro, despite the best efforts of the bankers and speculators, who, by the way, Kwasi Kwarteng should not have been so cosy at a cocktail party with straight after his announcements. Anyway, another point to note is that as far as I understand it, the bank used printed money to buy long-term gilts to settle the markets over those LDIs, just like they did with quantitative easing. And when they come to sell the gilts back into the market, the money they get will be unprinted. Now, other issues of the new Truss administration are her attitudes to Brexit and immigration. As I said in a recent video, it sounds like she and her Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris are quite content to leave the protocol in place with an internal trade border inside the UK down the Irish Sea, while leaving Northern Ireland under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, even though she's pushing ahead with the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill to give her the powers to override that protocol. And her recent pronouncements on economic growth seem to centre on just about making our border force redundant, although it effectively already is, while building the houses to accommodate newcomers. This is definitely not what the public voted for. And as to net zero, where's the scrapping of the green levies she talked about? For me, there are too many good-sounding messages tied in with too many contradictions. So Truss is still going hard for net zero as early as possible, as far as I can see, opening the borders wider than they already are, not bothering to complete Brexit properly, and using increased house building activity to grow our GDP. What does that make us? A WEF-inspired global population hub?